Hello, everybody. Happy Monday and welcome to Adobe Live, where we are every day between 12 and 1 here in the UK. Now, if you're watching us on YouTube, that's just fine. But where you really want to be is here at behance.net/Adobe Live, because the chat on YouTube doesn't work. We don't see it. What you need to do is come along and join the one on Behance. That way you can get involved in the community and ask questions, which is great. And today we've got my favorite visual artist, photographer, amazing and welding person in the whole world, Claire Luxton. Hello, Claire.
I mean, I think I should just leave after the introduction. It's done. It's done. Thank you. Thank you.
How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. The sun is shining, and yeah, I'm pleased to be back. Very excited to be back with something different this time after our last live chat. So yeah, I'm excited to get going on this one.
Oh, it's fantastic. Well, in a minute, just for the people who haven't met you before, we'll have a quick chat about who you are and what you do so they can see all of that stuff. But let me just let me not get tongue-tied. Let me just give out a shout to some of the people in the chat. So we've got Yulia here. Hello, Yulia. We've got Jackie. We've got Oliver. We've got Gareth. We've got Garav. We've got Tim in the background, as always. We've got Andreas. Guten Tag, Andreas. We've got Jack. Hi, Jack. Oh, and so many more. Some people joining. Oh, we've got Keith as well. Joined us a few times before. So great. So to those of you that have joined us before, and indeed some people have been along for the ride for the whole thing since this first started, welcome back. And for those of you that are new, then welcome to you, and hope you enjoy this. So, Claire, for people who haven't met you before and seen your incredible work, who are you and what do you do? Let's have a bit of an introduction.
So my name is Claire Luxton, and I am a multidisciplinary artist. So I've pulled up my Instagram for those who don't know my work, but I've had a long relationship with art ever since I was born. My mum might say in the womb I was an artist from conception, but yeah, it's been my passion, and it's been my professional full-time career for 5 years now. It was like my 5th year anniversary a couple of weeks ago, so that was really exciting. And yeah, my work ranges from sculptural pieces in steel. As Tim said, welding was one of the things that my dad taught me from a young age that I carried into my degree and now my my practice. But also what you can primarily see on my Instagram and also on my website is photography. And a lot of that is often self-portrait photography, because I like to use myself as a medium within the work. One of the things I was interested in most when I was working with sculpture was how I had to physically interact with different materials, and then that process of using myself as a vehicle carried into my photography. So this is brief little look at my work and what I've been up to. And I recently just got a brand new studio.
You did, yes.
It was very exciting because all through lockdown I was basically working like out of the house, and so my fiance Scott just had to be like put in a little box in a corner, and then I could just occupy the whole space. And so as soon as everything kind of eased up in the country, I was like instantly like on the hunt for my new studio, because I let my other one go when I moved house, and then we went into lockdown. So I just had this whole period of like not having any space to work. So yeah, it was really wonderful having had an opening over the weekend, and we had MTR and Christie's auction house, their Young Collectors Club came down. So we had a nice opening for the studio, had mimosas, and
Nice.
pastries and all that good stuff. So yeah, I mean, I think it's just from a personal point of view, it's incredible to see what so many creatives have managed to accomplish during such an unusual period of time.
Yeah, sure.
I found it really inspiring personally, just like everyone kind of coming together and like finding like comfort and inspiration in each other's like creativity, and that kind of like positive energy has been really great in such a strange circumstances.
Well, I mean, you've got a lot going on. When we were chatting earlier, you were telling me you got featured in Harper's Bazaar, right?
So one of an element within my work that's always been a passion, but that I haven't really shared as much as I would like to, is my writing. So with my work, I always I write poetry that like accompanies each piece, and sometimes the poetry will come first, and that will inspire me to create an artwork, and sometimes I'll create an artwork and I'll feel inspired by that piece to write something that goes along with it. And anyway, I'd over lockdown I'd written an essay, shall we say, on how I felt that art had people had kind of found this level of hope in isolation, and kind of globally as a global community, we'd all kind of found this way of communicating, like through language barrier, through cultural barriers, in this way of sharing art. You know, even the sort of like Thursday evening, like clapping was almost like a performative ritual that started to come about. So yeah, I wrote this essay, and I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna share it, and Harper's Bazaar really loved this essay, and yeah, they published that. So that was really exciting to have some of my written work published, as well as my
it's incredible. That is
photography. So yeah, that was really special. So it's been a good time, good few weeks since. I can't remember when I was on last. It was
a little while ago, I think, quite a little while ago. But the great thing is that now you're back.
I know. I mean, the months have kind of just like squidged together, and I
actually have a weekend flag here, so that I know that it's the weekend.
Hang the banners out.
just little flags. Oh, it is the weekend, because one day blends into another if you're not careful.
It's so true. And my fiance, he works weekends as well, and because I'm self-employed and work for myself, like I'll just literally work like all day every day. I don't have like hours, because I'm just like constantly like doing something. So I'll just sort of like a whole week has like vanished, and I'm like, wait, what day is it?
It's really easy to fall into.
Yeah, so I think this could be a trend. Maybe I need some weekend flags.
It's good.
Hang out the bunting.
It's a good idea. It really is a good idea. And today, though, you're going to be sharing some workflow stuff with it. That's right. It's good. Oh, let me just mention, by the way, Tim will put a link to your Instagram in, so everybody can take some time poring over that later. But you're going to share some workflow stuff with us today, isn't it?
Yes. So last week I put out on Instagram for people to just send me their pictures. I did put a theme, so I said like maybe botanical themed images, because I love some botanical themed images. But yeah, I just asked people to send me their photos. It could be taken on camera phone, professional. It could be their own piece of artwork, but I just wanted the image to be unedited. And I thought that today we could go through lots of different aspects and elements. So some more sort of like technical editing in my work, and then some other more fun, just like quirky editing that you can do at home and kind of experiment with and have a play around with. So
that sounds awesome.
That's what we're gonna do. So
well, let's get started. We'll have a look.
Head on over to Photoshop. So I had put this request out for these portraits, and this was my favourite portrait. It's
a lovely cat.
So this was from
Gorgeous.
Hayley, of her beautiful, beautiful cat. I don't know the cat's name. I feel like I should have emailed back and found out what this beautiful creature's name is, but we'll just call it Hayley, seeing as it's Hayley's cat.
Yeah.
So what I've done with this image is I've done a full edit. I was thinking sort of like warrior kitty, along with the idea of sort of like an ornamental garden, maybe sort of slightly Japanese inspired.
Yeah.
So this was the before, and this was the after of our majestic cat. So I just thought I could break down and go through the different layers of how I kind of got to this. And one of the things I really wanted to do is, in the original image, there's a lot of light around the foreground, and the cat is kind of quite flat amongst the foliage. So I really wanted to kind of create a halo of light and really bring the cat to the foreground and really enhance and kind of make it look more painterly, etc., etc. So if I just start and take off the layers, so this is the light layer, which really makes the difference on the cat's fur, kind of adds definition, highlights. And for those that don't know, we spoke about it briefly last time. The way that I like to use, I'm primarily a Photoshop girl. I do use some elements of Lightroom, but I love Photoshop because for me, it gives the most, like when I used to paint a lot, what I like to do with my photography is I see taking the photograph as like the really strong underpainting, like you going back to like an old master. So I like to get as much solid information in the picture as possible. And then I use Photoshop to do sort of like adding in a painterly way, to add in different colours, tones, textures, and bring things to the forefront that weren't necessarily there before, or highlight different things. So this light layer is kind of where you would paint in the highlights on a painting, for example. So take that layer off. Then this is the curves layer, which for me is about pushing things back and pulling things forward. So it's about the different kind of dynamics within the image. So in before, my eye is personally drawn to around the edge of the frame, and then afterwards I feel like you're more drawn into the middle of the picture, and I think it helps with, well, you know, like rule of thirds, all of that type of thing, and the way that your eye travels through the image. Then this is my color layer. I mean, I think the image is beautiful as it was, but it was just to kind of have a play around with color and different effects. Then this was my blur layer. So as you can see, we've already got some lovely depth of field within the image, but I just wanted to enhance that a little bit more. So I've enhanced the blur around the edge. And then in this layer, I just cloned out things that...
Oh, the leash.
So yeah, I cloned out the leash. Just think like there was just a few elements that I found distracting. So I got rid of them. So I thought what I could do is I'm just going to group all of this together and then we'll start again. Perfect.
I said perfect, and it was an accident, but it actually works. So there you go.
So we're back to our original image.
Yep.
There were some other bits that I cloned out around the front as well. Oh yeah, here I cloned out some of the leaves and other like debris that was on the floor. So
I've got Julia here saying, wow, perfect. Just here, and now perfect as well.
Hashtag perfect.
Perfect. There we go. Yeah, new thing. Word copyright Tony Harmer 2020. And the colours look so great from Gaurav.
Oh,
fantastic.
Thank you so much. So I've just created a new layer. So yeah, normally when I'm doing any sort of editing, literally the first step I'll always do is to like just clean up the image. So whether that's just like removing small imperfections or anything that's distracting, or cropping the image, or just getting it so that this is the foundation of what you want to work on. So typically if I'm cloning anything out, I'll use the clone stamp, or I might use the healing tool if it's for like skin or small areas, because for example, if I try and use the healing tool on this, because I've got it on.
Yeah, it's not the best with direction, is it?
No, it's not. So if I just undo that, and then you can be just like a lot more precise in kind of like what you're doing and how you're achieving it to make it look, you know, the blend look as realistic as possible. And obviously, you know, I took my time in the first one to make sure it looks absolutely perfect. But as you can see, you can quite quickly achieve.
Do you ever use the clone source panel? Do you ever use that to change things around? No,
not really. This is, I mean, it's one of those things where like this in Photoshop, there's like 50 different ways to do like one thing. Right. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's whatever you get used to, you know, you find that thing that works for you, and then someone comes along and is like, oh, you can do it that way, and you're like, no way. Like, you know, I learn things like all the time on Photoshop, and when, you know, you share with other creators how you do things personally, but I think for me this has always been like a more kind of just like a delicate way of doing it, and it just I like just sitting here like just painting away, kind of putting details back in and seeing how, you know, things, and always do it on a new layer, obviously, so that you haven't, you know, fully destroyed your old layer. But I'll just do this quickly for now, so people can get the gist of it.
I tend to put my edits like this onto a new blank layer.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, okay. I do. You know,
just have like and then you've just got that kind of thing.
And then in the control strip at the top where it says current layer, I just change it to current and below.
Yeah.
And then do it.
I think it completely depends. Like if I tell you when I do that is if I'm working on, let me get, so for example, when I was working on this piece. Yeah,
which I love.
That I did because I have literally hundreds of different layers in this image, because just for say the dandelion, so you have one layer which is the dandelion, which is obviously like masked out, and then you'll have another layer for the shadow, another layer for the highlight. Like there's so many layers that I would have them separate, but because on this it's quite a simple edit, and I kind of already know what I want to do with it. It's just, you know, I know I don't want the lead to be in there, so I'm just going to, you know, quickly.
I mean, it's whichever thing works. I'm not being critical, not even slightly, but no, it's just it's like you say, there are so many different ways to do.
Literally.
I often say that Photoshop is a lot like kung fu. You'll never master it. You'll always be learning, And somebody who's been using it for 5 minutes can sometimes teach someone who's been using it for 20 years a few tricks.
Oh, 100%. And that's kind of the beauty of it. You know, you can just switch different elements out, and so you now have a leash free. So the next thing that I did, I mean, again, you can do this on a new layer or whatever, but I'm just, for the purposes today, I'm just going to keep with it on this layer. So I wanted to, you know, have this element of blurring around the edge of the image. So I like to use Gaussian blur, and here we go. So obviously you can play around with how much you want it to be blurred. When you get too much, it doesn't look realistic. So I always go to the level where it's still, you can still see definition. And then basically what we're going to do is we're going to, actually no, I need to copy that one, do it on this layer. I know people will probably die that I haven't renamed all of my layers individually, but I did on my original one. So I remember
it's better to watch you actually do your work than watch you actually doing the admin side of it.
I know. It's so funny because I remember I shared something on Instagram once, which was just like a workflow, and like the number of people that were really like triggered by the fact that I hadn't named layers, and I was just like, oh my God. You know, I can't do everything. It's so much time just like, you know, when you've got like 300 layers and you're just like, naming. I'll do it later, don't worry.
Exactly.
Right, so I've added a blur, and then basically, because I don't want the whole thing, so I'm just adding a new layer mask, and then I'm going to use black brush, and we'll start at 100%, and then we'll work in. So because I know I want the cat to be fully back in focus.
Yeah.
And then I'll just lower this back down, make the brush quite big, and just kind of fluff around the edges. And it's just subtle, but you can see like in the foreground here, nice. It just adds that little softness, and again, it's helping draw the attention back to our beautiful cat in the middle. So the next thing that I tend to work on is the color. Now, again, million ways to do this, and it can sometimes be difficult, especially because when you look at this image, I think most people would say like the primary color is green. However, the primary color is actually yellow, because the main color in green is yellow, and unless it's actually like my hair color, which normally you would think would be cyan, but it's actually green, and it gets a bit confusing. But this is why green is like the bane of my life, literally, because if you're working with green and with skin tones and you want to change the color of green, you're going to be effectively changing the yellow, which is heavy in your skin pigment. So it can be a little confusing. This image is definitely more forgiving because we have a cat. But so the way I typically like to do this, and I would normally work on lots of different layers, but what I would do is I would do a hue and saturation layer. Let's call this out. So what I like to do is, so if you click onto green, for example, let's zoom in here, and we get a little, I like to take my little selector tool, and you then select the area that you think is most like the majority of the color. And as you can see, it's changed here to yellows too.
And bracketed in the bottom there as well. Yeah,
absolutely. So what I like to do is turn the saturation right up, and then play around with this slider here to kind of see what to get a more accurate selection of the majority of the color that I want to work with. So as you can see, as we're moving it, it goes more into the yellows, and then you go the other way, it selects more of the greens. So I'm going to leave that around here for now, take the saturation back down to 0. And then we can just sort of start to play with the slider. Have a little autumnal kitty. And you can see that obviously it's not 100% perfect, but you start to get the gist. So you can see obviously like on some leaves, there are elements that haven't fully changed, color, because the selection it's not a perfect selection.
Have you ever tried the on-image adjustment inside of that panel?
No.
Pardon me, sorry. There's an instance of what I like to call stapler accident finger in there. You can just see it just to the left of greens. When you click on that, you can actually go onto the image and click and drag, and then it will select that range of colours. So as you move it, can you see that? Yeah. It changes it. And you can change the hue by holding down the command key. Just a tip. Sorry, I can't help myself throwing one in, but
chuck it in there, 100%. So what I like to do, similarly, is once I've made that selection, I then go back in and play with this again, just to see kind of where my main selection is at. So I'm kind of sit here, and also you can see another thing that's changed is in the cat's eyes, because obviously it was reflecting color. So I'm just going to mask that out again with a black brush, not that giant though. Let's take out the whole cat's head.
Yes, absolutely. There we go.
There we go. Bring that color back, and then, just because I wanted to show a quick way of doing it, another thing to kind of quickly make these leaves a similar color is another new layer, another hue and saturation, and I just colorize. So I kind of I take a guess initially, and I'll just paint in this time with the opposite, the inverse, with a white brush, and kind of and so I can see it's roughly, maybe take the lightness down a bit, maybe make it slightly warmer, and then any areas that you feel you can just kind of paint over where it hasn't.
Right, I get it. Yeah, I see.
It's just like a subtle, it's because the majority of the image is as I would want it to be, but obviously there are certain areas which aren't, and then it just kind of blends in perfectly, and you don't need to.
This is a thing that people who are new to Photoshop or fairly inexperienced in Photoshop don't actually understand, Claire, is that the reason it doesn't get all the greens, of course, is because that image is grayscale. And it's the actual underlying values that are the problem, which is why it doesn't do it. But you've got a great way of working around that.
Well, there's never, there's never a perfect solution, and there's lots of other ways of kind of like dealing with this. Like sometimes I'll literally spend the time going through like every color value and like changing every single color value, so that everything kind of eventually becomes the color that I want it to be. But just for the purposes of this, because I use Colorize a lot actually. I think it's really great, really great tool within Photoshop, especially for sort of like, I think if you're doing like makeup or eye color, or like a fake lipstick, things like that, with different like balance levels, is really effective.
Makeup's super tricky, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah,
you've got some excellent treatments on your work of that. I mean,
it
your
is.
makeup's great anyway, but you know, you know, and but you have got some. It's tricky. It's a really difficult thing to do.
For example, this so this photo shoot, where is it? So this photo shoot with Nikki Lilly, which was for a magazine cover. Most of sort of like most of the colouring in the makeup I did in like post-production. So like she didn't have purple eyeshadow on here. I did that in Photoshop, and obviously this was green. So again, that was like a nice long edit in terms of getting
it's a beautiful shot.
Getting all of the pigments right. And yeah, she didn't have this kind of like amber eyeshadow on. And yeah, so there's a lot that can be done with kind of makeup in terms of just using different blend layers and different brushes, etc., etc.
It's always soft touch though, isn't it? It's always gentle.
Yeah, that's what I would say, is that, you know, if I was doing this image for like a client, for example, I'd spend obviously a lot longer on each element. And I think it's all about, it's why I always tend to have like so many layers, because I always like to build up the layers like really slowly, you know, just add a tiny bit here, add a tiny bit there. And it's like, oh, why do you have like 7 curves layers when you could just have one in the correct positions to be? It doesn't come out the same. Like each little like nuance, it's kind of like marinating a chicken breast, say for example, with all of the different herbs and spices. You know, you just add a little bit, add a little bit, add a little bit, and it kind of it then starts to evolve into a different creature. And then you sort of like do your like before and after, and you're like, oh wow, bloody hell. That's come a long way.
The thing is though, is that you're not dealing with just the photograph, you're making a piece of art, so your process around it, of course, is going to be different, right? Because you're going to see things, you are going to build things up in the same way that you might paint them. So I think that's why you're working that way. Yeah, exactly.
So the other thing that I kind of do at this point is, so one, as you said, like, you know, learning new things all the time. I never used to use selective colour, but since about 15 months ago, I absolutely love selective colour. Yeah. I just think it's great for creating like really like yummy tones is how I would describe it, and some depth within the image. So I like to, I mean, I do work on the other layers, but my favourite is neutrals. And you can just sort of like play around. I mean, I'll do some extremes, but it's how you get that kind of like, in my opinion, how you get that cinematic look within an image. So I'm just going to add a little bit of cyan. Add a little bit of yellow back in.
I love this. It's very, very Lewis Carroll, I think. Very, very Alice in Wonderland. Right?
Yeah, definitely. I just felt like it was such a magical image. And then I'm going to go to the reds, because now we have a lot of reds in the image. You can kind of see how that is affecting. I mean, I think I've made this edit slightly redder than the last one. Add a little bit more magenta in. And I think I strongly, like, people ask me questions all the time about, you know, editing and how I edit. And I just, all I can say is like play and like have fun. And there's no, I think you can get too hung up on like the right way of doing things. And, you know, when I first started sharing like my processes with people, I was like really self-conscious, like, oh, but like, that's not how you're meant to do it, or any of those things. Like, and I think ultimately, like, everyone has a different process. And I think that you just need to do your thing, because as long as you're happy with the result, or you're, you know, generating what you envisage, and that's all that really matters. You know, the software's there to be experimented with and
absolutely 100%. Yeah, I agree.
So I've done a few tweaks in. There you go. You can see it's kind of, it had like quite a reddy pinky hue before, and now it's got a little bit more depth. And then the other element that I like to use is the color balance. And normally I'll have like so many of these different layers where I'll just like make tiny little tweaks here and there. So I like to start off in the shadows, and you can see the kind of difference this makes. I'm just going to add some red and a little bit more green, and then some blue. You just see it makes a subtle difference. To my eyes, I'm just like, oh
no, it's coming across. It's coming across. We see it. Yeah,
that's good. And then in the highlights, I always love some cool tones in the highlights. And again, you can kind of just see the subtleties. And then lastly, on the midtones, add some more red and green. And for me, that's made a difference.
No, it has.
Yeah. So you can see so far, like if I group together our color layer, and pop that one in.
And Siobhan in the chat is just saying that she feels like this is the advantage when you're self-taught. You haven't been told what's right and wrong, and I think that's true. You know, there isn't one. If you're working on a photograph and you are representing a person as a person, that's a different thing. Maybe there is a right and a wrong way to do that. But if you're being creative like this,
100%.
There isn't a right or wrong.
Look, if you have, you know, if you're doing sort of like, you know, a beauty edit for, you know, like a commercial magazine, and they want it to look a certain way, there'll be a certain way to do it that's going to achieve the look that they want. But that's very technical, it's very prescriptive, and it's quite tedious. dare I say it. It's quite tedious editing. You know, this is about you know, being playful and having fun with your edits. The last thing that I'm going to do on this color group is I'm going to enhance the cat's little eyeballs. So what I like to do here is, because I already like the color of the cat's eyes, I'm just going to take the saturation up a bit, which is going to saturate the whole image, but don't worry. And then I'm just going to tweak it a little bit because I just want it to be a bit more ambery in tone. And then I'm just going to invert that, and then take my little white brush and just start to paint that back in. Just add a subtleness to the eyes, which we'll come back to when we get onto our light layer, which makes quite a bit of a difference. But as you can see, it's just kind of brought the cat's eyes
really out.
And especially from a distance in the image, it just kind of draws, and also the tones then match a lot more with the tones that I've added. So I think that makes a difference. So the next thing that I like to do is I play around with the curves, and this is where we're going to generate that effect of pulling the cat more to the forefront and the rest into the background a bit more. So just pull up a nice curves layer. Now this, again, so much you can do with curves, some of which I'll actually show on another image if I get time to it and I haven't gone on.
We're good.
But so what I like to do is just pull it down in the middle, and then I'll go in with, I mean, the majority of how I edit is brushes, as you can see. A nice, soft, fluffy brush. Play around with the flow or the opacity. I mainly play with the flow when we come to the other bit, I'll show you why I will change the opacity. So I'm just going to take the flow down.
So we're back to makeup there, really, aren't we? Because in makeup, it's nice. In a lot of things, it's nice, big, fluffy brush, light applications, and building the application to blend it out. Yeah. Not that I would know, of course. I mean,
I don't know if I believe you, Tim. I feel like you've dabbled. Let's be honest.
Well, maybe a little bit. Okay.
So yeah, I'm going to just start here and start to bring. Let's take the flow right up because I want to start to bring the details back in the areas that we want. So I kind of want it to be like this kind of halo in the foliage. So you can just see here and here the difference between, you've now kind of, I feel like the eye is drawn inward more than it would have been. Then I like to get another curve, and this time I'm going to take the curve up and I'm going to invert that, and then I'm going to take a white brush and I'm just going to go back in and repeat the process.
And that really is working well, you directing the eye in.
Yeah, I mean, if I group them, I just feel like it makes, you've got a lot going on in the image. Like it's very like fussy, like there's lots of elements, which is beautiful, but like I just think you need guidance. So I feel like this really helps the cat be the first thing you see, and then it kind of, I feel like there's like a spiral within the image. So then you kind of, I feel like your eyes drawn there, and then for me it kind of goes around like that. I mean, people look at images in different ways, but I think that this, without that, I kind of, this is like the
internal complexity is what I'd call that, just there and that.
This is the first thing I would see without the direction. And I mean, I could work on these layers for ages. Like I'll sometimes put in an exposure layer as well. I like to kind of just subtly darken the image there, and then just bring a little bit of, it's subtle tweaks on all these layers, just slowly building up depth and light. And tones, and then just going back to each layer. And then my favorite bit is what I like to call painting with light, and so Command Shift N to get up a new layer. I want to have it on soft light, and then you're going to tick this little box which is fill with soft light.
Yep.
And you can use this layer for like lots of different things. It's effectively dodging and burning. That's
what I was just going to ask. Are you going to DMB it? Yeah.
It's. I mean, not in the same way that you would say for like skin in like a super delicate way, but it's more in a global way. So. Again, we get back to our brush.
We do. There's nothing wrong with that. Brushes are awesome.
I mean, I mean, you can get so many brushes, but for me, this is just, the brush to rule all brushes.
Most of the painters I know, and digital and otherwise, have just like a handful of brushes that they use all the time.
Yeah. 100%. So what I like to start to do is I start with the highlights. So any area that the light would naturally fall on a face or on the cat, you don't want it at 100%, that's for sure. So taking down the flow, I mean, It varies. On skin, I wouldn't go, I would have it at like 3 or 4 because it's slightly different here. And when I was playing around with it earlier, you could have it a lot higher. So you just sort of start to paint in and just keep playing around with how big you want the brush. So you just start to paint in these highlights. And for me, this adds just like a depth and like a level of like 3-dimensionality into
you're really showing there how you actually do understand the anatomy of that cat, and that's what some people often miss.
Yeah, you have to. I think that comes from like drawing as well. So when I used to do a lot more drawing, you get really used to. A thing I learned really early on is when you draw, you don't draw. So it's very like people want to just like draw the line, like an outline, but you actually draw the light and the shade. So you figure out where light is hitting certain things, and so you wouldn't just draw a line here. You'd basically fill in here and fill in here, and then leave this. And it
suggests everything else. Absolutely, yeah. And it is understanding those planes, but I mean the way that you're brushing that in, you've got a really and that does come from drawing, I think, because a lot of people, when they're approaching this, people that maybe don't draw, they are kind of processing what they think is there rather than, what is actually seen. And that's where what belies your skill there, I think, is that you do understand the surfaces.
Yeah, and I think, and also it just comes with, again, just like practice and experimentation come into the eyes as well. And you don't want to do the whole eye. Again, you just want to follow the plane of where the light would naturally catch in the cat's eye. So if we go away from the cat, you can already see, so that's it without and that's it with. You can just start to see how it really just brings, like, it makes it pop.
Yeah, it does.
And you can do it from like further away as well. I mean, I would just start and brush this in, because when I did a project for a commission for the Birmingham Royal Ballet, which we briefly spoke about last time, and in that project I photographed a wolf dog, a duck.
That's right. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
So I photographed all these different animals, and then I just spent hours like editing ballerinas to look like animals and animals to subtly look like ballerinas. So I just spent a lot of time like looking at animals and how they look. So anyway, you can continue to do that with the white brush really subtly. I mean, I would do it in much smaller stages than that, but it's just so you can see. And then I move on to the black brush, and this is where you can really start to add in some depth.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're deepening the tones at this point now, aren't you? Right?
Yeah, deepening the tones, adding in that shadow that will even more bring other elements to the foreground. And yeah, you can just start to see how much
it's really starting to take it.
Really takes shape. Yeah. And it lends itself slightly to sort of like graphic design as well, I would say. And when you see like digital artists, digital painting, that type of thing. So I'm aware of the time. So I wanted to show you another, just like a completely different thing that was quite fun to do. I was sent this picture by Michelle, taken on her phone, and I wanted to show you how you can turn it into basically a Polaroid.
Ooh.
So the first thing I do is make it look vintage. shall we say. So there's a few different processes in that. This is also a lot more, this is something that you could do a lot more easily in Lightroom, I would say, because there's lots of elements within Lightroom that lend itself to kind of more, you've got the grain panel, etc., etc. So what I've done here, going back to curves. Now, if you just, I'm gonna take all of these off again. With curves, I feel like you can take a really simple image and just with a few curves, you can already make it look kind of, just give it a zhuzh, give it a little depth and energy. So what I like to do is click in the middle of your curve, put a little marker, then another little click here and another little click here. So we're going to basically play with your standard S curve. So, take this up a little bit, take this down a little bit, and then I like to bring these, this is what gives it more vintage.
So actually limit that, limit that, absolutely. By the way, for those of you that are watching this, this is in an RGB image. These things are flipped around the other way if you're in CMYK.
Yes.
Not that you should edit in CMYK anyway.
No.
Too limiting.
Let's not do that, people.
No, let's not do that. So, let's make a promise to all of ourselves. We're not going to edit in CMYK. Absolutely.
So you can already see. So here's the before. Just simple iPhone image. Afterwards, it has a lot more of like a photography feel to it. Shall we say? Okay. And then you can also go into sort of your different color channels to do more subtle tweaks. Add a little bit of blue there in the highlights, which can make it look a little bit more vintagey, and in the reds as well. And then another thing that I like to do is when you take I don't actually have, because I've got a Polaroid camera myself, like an old one. When you look at a Polaroid image, they're not crisp, they're not sharp like digital photography. So the first thing I do again is I'll do a little blur on it, not to that level, but just a subtle blur, because everything is so much more softer in analog, but especially in kind of like Polaroid photography. And then in Lightroom, you could just use the grain tool, but I'm just going to add some noise, and I'm just going to keep it on uniform, so you don't get too many, because if you use the Gaussian, it's very reminds me of white noise on a TV. So just keep it uniform and just quite light. I mean, I must admit I prefer adding grain in Lightroom. The tool is brilliant, but this gives a good subtle effect. And then once you're happy with your image, save it and export it as a JPEG. And then what I've done here is, so I've just got our image and I've got it just on a white background. And then this is an old Polaroid template that I've had for ages that's just quite fun for editing. But what I'll show you, so you place your image underneath, which already looks quite effective, but the key thing that I like to do is to add a drop shadow, because if you look around the edge of the frame, without it looks quite flat. And when you look at a Polaroid image, all of them have this kind of shadow.
They do, yeah.
Around the edge. So just adding in, I'll just get rid of this so I can do it again. So if you just go to FX and just add in the drop shadow, why is it not coming up? It just basically adds that that depth, and it makes it look more realistic. But it's quite fun to do, because I see a lot of people, I feel like this is very trendy,
That is very convincing, though.
That's good.
Do you ever add like a gloss contour on top? Do you ever put like a layer on and add sort of a gloss highlight just to make it look as if it's a photograph of a Polaroid?
Sometimes, but these ones are from. I like it as if it's looked like it's scanned in from the computer, as opposed to taking. But 100%, you could definitely put like a highlight over the top, and sometimes I also will. I can just do it with just some random text, but you can, for example, just
nice, yeah.
Leaf.
Oh, I like that typeface. Bon vivant.
Yeah, it's really nice. But sometimes what I'll do is actually scan in some of my own handwriting and then sort of like do a nice like multiply so that it looks like you've actually like handwritten it onto the surface. But it just shows how like versatile it is. It's a completely different type of editing to what we were looking at before, but it's another way of playing around with.
Absolutely nice with trick.
Imagery. Yeah.
I like it.
That's kind of
fun. We're nearly out of time today, Claire, unfortunately, which is
other things.
Yeah, I know, but you know what the good news is there, right?
Yeah.
That means we've got to have you back again.
I know.
Yeah, and hopefully, we could get about 2 or 3 more hundred in over the next couple of years. We could end up. Claire does welding. Yeah. I'm so impressed with the fact that you can weld. I'm impressed with your work, but the fact the icing on the top is. Yeah. And you can weld.
I can weld. I'm trying to think how we could make that some sort of like virtual reality, like Adobe virtual reality welding session or something where you can like weld with on your iPad. I don't know.
We'll find a way around it. But hopefully it won't be so we're all doing it in isolation in the future. That would be really, So
live demonstration would be great.
Yeah, we could have. I'd love it if we did a crazy Adobe version of Repair Shop where we just, we just took pieces of work that need just a little bit more and add something, even if that's welding. That'd be great.
Scrap challenge.
Yeah. Oh, God, that used to be so good. Anyway, right. So everybody, our time with Claire is nearly at an end. People have loved watching this, Claire, and they've picked up loads of little tips, and I think it will encourage people. Gaurav is saying he's learned so much with so much positive thinking. Siobhan saying great session. Thanks. Angus is very interested in the welding. There we go. Zombie Army 807 is saying amazing. Michael saying thank you very much. Ivan saying great. There's no flugelhorn in this episode. I'm so sorry. I think we've been asked to backpedal off the flugelhorn. just a little bit. And Sandrine, I don't think you were aware of the flugelhorn thing, Claire, so you're probably thinking, where is that coming from?
If you're involved, it doesn't surprise me, really.
So, there you go. That is the nature of the thing. But there we are. Now, Andreas is saying amazing. So fantastic. It's been really lovely.
Thank you.
Having you here for an hour.
Yes.
It's been fantastic. And best of luck with the new studio and everything. That's really great. And everybody can see that on Instagram. And while our time here is about an end, don't forget we have our own Discord. So you can jump on Discord and have a chat. That's quite busy from time to time. People having that. It's been fabulous seeing everybody here. Tim's just popped the link into the chat, which is fantastic. But for now, I think this is a good time for us to say cheerio, Claire, and see everybody soon. Back tomorrow. So yes, or I'll be back tomorrow anyway. Claire won't. Claire unfortunately won't be back tomorrow. It'll just be me again. Oh no. But stay happy, everybody. Stay creative and make some new great stuff. See you later. Bye.
fall out.